podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
No question about that. It's supported by you, our listeners, through patreon.com/NQAT pod, where you can get access to our weekly ad-free bonus episode talking about football around the Premier League and Europe. Welcome to No Question About That. This is the midweek pod with me, Ed, and that is Wayne Barton. I don't know why I put a large pause in there. Dramatic entrance. Wayne, how's it going?
Nor do I know why I said that is Wayne, because now we've switched back over to the audio. People was like, that, they'll know the voice that's coming, but it sounded like you were referring to someone who was on screen, and
yeah,
it's no longer the case. And we only exist in audio form. It's just a voice that once belonged to a human vessel that's just flying around audio waves. Thanks very much, Ed.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, you're right. Half the man you used to be, Wayne. Just the voice.
I mean, it's a Christmas diet. It just worked too well, I think. Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Post-Christmas diet, obviously not the Christmas diet where everything expands. We've gone the other way.
Very good. Well, we're going to talk about United v Fulham. Different kind of test to the ones that Michael Carrick faced against Arsenal and City. Some job changes at United in the youth ranks, what it means, if anything, shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, I was going to say. That might be the wrong analogy. Hopefully we're not sinking. New stadium stuff that's going on. Does it mean anything? We'll see. And then transfer market. Looks like it will be coming to a close on, I think it's Tuesday night, isn't it? It's February the 2nd at midnight. And it looks like United will be doing 0 deals. All right, let's start with the transfer market. Why not?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a short conversation. It looks like nothing is happening. I mean, there was also an awful lot of talk recently about outgoings, I think, more than incomings. Manuel Ugarte, apparently wanted by Ajax. I was a bit suspicious about that. Josh Zirkzee wanted in Italy, seems more real. And Kobe Mainoo, who, of course, was wanted by Napoli, and he wanted out as well because he was getting no game time. All three of those situations seem to have changed quite a bit. Thoughts?
I can't see. I think the Ugarte thing was nonsense, and obviously we knew once Amorim was sacked, Kobe wasn't going anywhere. Zirkzee one's interesting because I would have also put that in the same camp as those two rumours, but with Mbeumo playing through the middle, with a way to put Mbeumo and Ahmad in the side, and that being one of them, with Šeško obviously from the bench and Cunha coming on from the bench as well. It's changed a little bit somewhat with Dogu's injury, but that's only to put Cunha in the side, I would have thought. So it's difficult to see where Zirkzee gets game time over the next few weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something happen there. But I know that earlier in the window, the club were trying to engineer a permanent move, or at least an option with a permanent thing, and no one wanted to do that, and I can see why. So I think that that's going to be the crux here. I do think eventually the club will be shoehorned into just letting him go on loan, because I just can't see a scenario where it makes sense to keep him around, especially if we keep all the bodies there, and even if we don't, that's what Obi's there for in the youth team.
In longer term, yeah. He was never an easy fit with United. He's neither a 9 nor a 10, and I guess in a world where there were 2 10s, he could have been a winner under Amorim, but he didn't really play very much. So, and then in this system where you got slightly wider players, at least Carrick wants slightly wider players, and then there's just so overstocked in those areas. You got Cunha, Mount, Ahmad, and Mbeumo, Dorgu when he was fit, Bruno at 10. They're all in those sort of forward areas, and Šeško obviously, and so he didn't fit, but they're not going to let him go this winter for a loan. It doesn't make any sense. What's the point? He's not a massive wages. So United save a couple of million to have a player less, and then we get an injury crisis and we're like, why do we let him go?
No, I agree with the principle there, but I think then there's the idea of United keeping a player who wants to play football. And there's a World Cup year. I don't know if he's really involved in the squad, but I mean, this is his last chance to sort of get into that conversation. So I do think even on a loan, I think that they would, because I don't think there's any sense in keeping a player around. There are other players to mention there. Lacey as well, he's in a position there. Look, we had a conversation right when Zirkzee started at United, and it wasn't obvious to see where he played. I mean, he scored on his debut, great, but after that, he didn't look like a natural centre forward, and that was very evident within 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
And I remember on the podcast, I made a joke that he just played his position of footballer, where he was just on the pitch and you weren't quite sure what he did, but he was a neat footballer and he could do tidy things. And I think that's probably proven to be the case. I can't see how... Look, there'll be a place for him, maybe as a 10 in a different kind of team that plays a different kind of football. But where we found this out, and it's not Xerxes a symptom of the problem, where we've discovered many times through our scouting and recruitment over the last few years, is that we've brought players in. Agate is another player, but there are other players as well, where the urgency required to play United is so much quicker than those players are. There's a basic level of ball competency there that you have to deal with it under pressure. And they're obviously very good footballers. They just haven't been able to deal with the pace of what it takes to play either in the Premier League or at United. I know that there's a footballer in there. He's quite likeable as well. He can get the crowd on side, and he's got such a good touch. You know, his actual footballing skills are there to be seen. He's no matter what. And we've tried many different ways to get him in different systems at United. Nothing's worked. And I think it is also for the best for United if he goes on loan with a view to saying this guy's playing football and this is what he can do, because he's not going to get any admirers while he's stuck doing nothing. So it might just be a sensible thing to put him out.
Yeah, I mean, he'll definitely be gone by the summer, I imagine, if it's nothing in the next 3 days. And he needs football. United just have to get out of this cycle where we're giving footballers away for free, which is happening a lot. I mean, watch Marcus Rashford. Barcelona definitely want him. They haven't got the money. And so I imagine that there'll be negotiations over a new loan come the summer. I think just handing talented footballers away for nothing. And I've been trapped in that cycle for a long time. And they're obviously trying to bring the base of the wages down, which will happen quite a lot this summer. All right. I mean, younger footballers, maybe a couple will go. I mean, it looks like Reece Bennett's off to Fleetwood. Lacey could definitely do with it. Playing under 21s is a waste of time for him. But he's got Ahmad and Bumo ahead of him in the team now. And his chance was really in that lead up to AFCON when he could have got some minutes, and Ruben Amorim refused to give him any minutes until right at the last moment. Very odd management of him, but he could do with some minutes. Chido Obi, I know there's been talk about him going on loan previously. I mean, he's still kind of feels like he's still growing into his body under 21s. Yeah. He doesn't look. He's not. We know the talent he's got, but it's not like he's an outstanding performer every week, right? He's still trying to work out what his game is and learn. So a loan might be too early for him. I mean, he's only 18 or whatever, 17, 18. So.
Yeah, I like him. Obviously, he broke through and scored loads of goals. I think that skipping that stage of his development has hurt him. We all got excited about how many goals he was scoring, but I think it was a big step for him. And I think that's a lesson. You know, we've seen staggered development in other players. Sometimes players can just move through. You know, we were all worried about Lacey stepping up, but he had the right temperament about him. We're all worried about Cobby stepping up, and his temperament was great.
Yeah.
Obi, I'm not saying he doesn't have the right temperament, but I just think it was a big leap in a short space of time. And a lot of demand in that system where he was asked to score goals or lead the line, where you're so isolated. It's just, I wouldn't again say loan's a bad move, but it'd have to be the right. We've seen some good players go on loans and they're really struggling. And I'm thinking of a lot of strikers that we've had over the years that have gone into difficult situations. Like Wheatley recently, I know he's done quite well, but he was the move to Northampton right from, because he's obviously come back and he's looking for a better one. It's like we just can't seem to get a right place for the strikers, and I don't want. It would be a terrible shame considering the investment that's been put into Obi and the high ceiling that it appears to have. If we ruin this stage of his development, it's a really sensitive time for him. So it's got to be the right loan if they find one. Yeah,
I mean, other loans, we've seen Harry Amas move from Wednesday to Norwich. A little odd one, since he was doing so well at Wednesday. I mean, they are definitely going down, and maybe there's a worry that the intensity there will drop because everyone knows they're already relegated. They're on minus something points. I can't remember what it is. Norwich are only just above the relegation zone, so it's not like he's moving to a team that's like storming the championship, but they are playing for something. The stakes are real, so maybe that's a different test for him. Important, I guess. I guess we're like that position of left back. That'll be in question this summer. Like, can Luke Shaw still do that? We'll find out over the next 15 games. Whether he's still got the physicality to get up and down, because he's been quite conservative in the last 2 games for understandable reasons. What happens with Diego Leon, Tyrell Malacia? There's another one. He's played a few under-21s and like training and been on the bench a couple of times. He needs football. It's ridiculous, really. He's lost 3 years of his life. So he's going to be an open spot, that left-back one, and interesting to see whether Amas can develop enough to challenge for it next season. Wheatley had that terrible loan at Walsall where he didn't play last season, and Northampton's gone better, and just trying to find the right kind of level. Yeah. All right. Under-21 coaching changes. So Travis Binion's stepped up to become part of the Michael Carrick's coaching team for the rest of the season. Adam Lawrence has come back in to take over the under-21. Darren Fletcher's back to the under-18s. He turned down an option to coach with the first team. I guess that makes sense, actually. He's on a pathway, right? If he wants to be a serious coach / manager, taking us 6 months out now doesn't make so much sense. And then Fletcher will take over the pathways manager role, who I'm not sure who was doing that before. But that's basically to say, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, how do you get them into the first team and what's that look like?
Yeah. No, I think that's sensible. From Fletcher's point of view, definitely, because, I might be giving a spoiler away for anything we're talking about later down the line. I would still be hesitant about making big changes in the summer, about making any changes if it goes well. But presuming that we do when we bring in staff, all of that senior staff is likely to go. And then it'll be the lower sort of levels of junior staff that have got more chance of being kept on. And I think in a sensible sort of way, Fletcher's saying, do I want to remain at Manchester United? This is the best way to do it. I think that probably is. Lawrence, I think, is a really smart move because he knows all those players. He's been around them for so long and they've took that step up, and he's just sensible. It's a sensible recruitment to bring him back in, especially considering Travis has moved up to... And Travis has got familiarity around those players as well. I think they're both good coaches. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with both of them, Adam and Travis, and I think they're both good guys. They've been around the club for a while, so they know the club as well. And like I've said elsewhere and on this pod in the past, I don't think that that's a value we can underestimate. So I know like people used to joke about McPhelan putting the cones out and everything like that. But there is still a value in continuity around there, as we've seen. I can't even remember the name of Amrim's assistant. Do you know what I mean? It was
Carlos Fernandez was one, but that's it. I can't remember. I mean, that was probably a major weakness of the Amrim coaching team. He brought in all these people none of whom had any experience in the Premier League at all. And Carrick's done a very sensible thing. I know a few of his coaches will provoke strong reactions, and they do, for different reasons, but he's got a team of people who very much understand the Premier League, English football, and so on. And you've got a mix of good tactical minds. We've seen the work already that's been done sort of out of possession, and that's the full coaching team. He is hands-on, but also has got enough people there. So, it's a live question for whoever gets appointed in the summer, whether Carrick does brilliantly and gets the job, or it's more likely someone else. What kind of team do they bring with them, right? Ten Hag had to have 4 new coaches appointed 5 months before he got fired because they were realising something was not right there. Amrim, it was a disaster. So, yeah. Tuchel's an interesting one because he's worked with Steve Holland before, I think. And obviously, a few of the others on the list might well have done as well. Anyway, so those are the under-21 changes. Transfer market quiet, we think, for the next 3 days. We have got Collette Roche, who has been the COO at United, has been promoted to CEO of the Stadium Development Company. What do we make of this? Because in one sense, it's a kind of signal that they're taking this project seriously, and maybe there's financing. I have some suspicions about that, I know they've been hawking it around various private equity funds and the Middle East sovereign funds as well. So they're looking to make about £2 billion worth of financing there, something like that. This has all come at the same time when Ineos are struggling a little bit financially. I would say some of the reporting around that, the kind of disaster scenarios, was total nonsense, but they're not in a position to leverage too much more. They're trying to deleverage, in fact. The Glazers aren't going to put a penny in, so it's kind of interesting time on the stadium front.
Yeah, I still feel like it's a case of emperor's new clothes with this, because there's, like I said, there's no financing in place. They announced it about around a year ago. So this idea that, they're going to build this new stadium, regeneration project, they like add all this fanfare and everything like that. But the club's in a huge amount of debt. It's going to require so much money to turn them around on the pitch. You need the debt gone as well. People seem to keep forgetting about that. And then, I don't mean you need the debt gone to build a stadium. I mean, like, in order for long-term health of the club, all these steps need to be taken. If you were to ask the man on the street, would you prefer a shiny new stadium or for Manchester United, or would you prefer the debt to be gone? Then they would say the debt to be gone, because it instantly makes us more equipped to challenge, even with the financial disasters that we've faced in recent years. We would be in so much of a better position with like PSR and whatever that regulation changes into when it does. So that's the primary thing that needs to be taken care of. So I'm still massively skeptical about the stadium, just based on the fact that we just don't have the money. And I know you said like they are going around looking for money. Of course they are. That's why they've set up the regeneration projects, to attract investment and to attract interest and all that sort of thing. The cosmetic announcements all the time, aren't there? There's never anything that's any substance, never anything that says that this is a stage next to what we've announced previously. Who cares, really? Who cares about all these things? I mean, I'm sure Collette would be good at doing whatever she's doing in that role, but it's not a matter of interest to us, apart from them making it clear that she's on there. But I don't think anyone would have been bothered. So I think it's just more like a public step to say, oh, we're still here. This is the next step in this nothingness that's another step towards nothing so far. Do you know what I mean? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, no, I understand why it could feel like that. I mean, they are pushing it as a separate project. So the stadium, the way they'll finance it, I think, speculation, is that there'll be a stadium development company. It'll be separate from Manchester United. That will raise the finances. That will be some kind of mix of owner funding. So Jim may put some money in. I can't imagine the Glazers will. And private equity funding, maybe some bonds or bank loans, the way that Real Madrid and Barcelona have done it, and maybe some sovereign wealth. And the question really is, I mean, you could definitely raise £2 billion for a stadium that's going to generate hundreds of millions of pounds a year, right? That I don't think that thing necessarily is the problem, right? In of itself, it's going to generate lots of money. Yeah. The whole redevelopment project's been approved by the powers that be, Manchester Mayor, Traffic Council, so on, central government support, and so on. The things that have to happen are planning permission for the various housing and commercial units to be around there, move that Freightliner depot, agree on a fee for the land. And it looks like they're back on the canopy now, because that was in the graphics, right? So they may be close to a deal with Freightliner, may have done it and it's not been announced. And so there's a few steps. The financing thing can happen, but it's share of the uplift later, right? So Real Madrid are making more than 100 million euros a year extra through their development. It may actually be even more than that, because some of the event stuff is in a separate company. Barcelona are going to be doing the same with Camp Nou when it's finally done, which is taking forever. Obviously, like Barcelona's regeneration, there's cost like €1.5 billion. It's a major gamble, but they will get an uplift of 100 to 150 million euros a year. Something like that will happen with United. And I know, part of the protest this weekend is around this new stadium. There's a lot of people very angry that United will move out of Old Trafford. There's some exaggeration, I think, in the media about the state of Old Trafford, that it's like, falling down and about to collapse. And there's a lot of cynicism for understandable reasons about why United might be looking for a new stadium, at all, right? Is it wrapped up in the valuation of the club because the Glazers eventually want to sell it for more? Does Sir Jim want to profit from land deals and housing? I think a lot of this is kind of cynical, bordering on conspiracy theory. It's not actually how it's going to work. But, you can kind of understand why fans have zero trust in the owners to do the right thing by the club. I mean, zero. Why would you have any trust in these fuckers, right? And is it all vaporware, as you kind of think? Yeah, maybe they're trying to manifest it. The more they're out there selling it, the more maybe someone comes forward with the money. That could well be true. And it is moving very, very slowly in terms of, we had our Gary Neville's committee with Sebastian Coe, and then we had the planning process and trying to get government support online, and a bit of deliberately misunderstanding what that kind of government support might be in the media. And then we had the architectural plans, and now we have the planning approval, and then they had the drama with Freightliner. And now at some point, we think maybe we'll get an announcement on financing, and maybe we'll break ground in 2027 or 2028 or 2035 or 2030. Never, who knows?
No, I think that, yeah, you may be more optimistic than what I am with that. Maybe I think it's because it's learning to crawl before you can walk in this situation. I really think that we need to put our house in order, and the debt is crippling the club. Sort the club out first. Sort out the club's health before you start with the vanity project. And that's just my opinion as a supporter.
Sure, yeah.
Look, we'd all, I'm a season ticket holder. I go every week. I don't think there's anything massively wrong with it. I can see the issues. I can see why it needs modernising and all that sort of stuff. But I love the ground. I'd be happy to stay in it. I'd be happy to see it modernised as well. But that's taking that out of the equation and just saying, all right, well, if that's the plan and that's what they're going with, then fine. I just can't see it happening. I'm just very sceptical about it at this moment in time, just because I would have thought after the Europa League final, when everyone knew that it was a disaster for the club and everyone knew how much it would impact us, and, to the fact that we've even sacked a manager yet again in winter around the transfer window, partly because then we don't have to reinvest anything. Well, we've hired a caretaker, partly so we don't have to reinvest anything into the transfer market. And the party line once again has been, oh, we think this squad's good enough to get into the Champions League. Well, you say that every time you sack a manager, and you told us this time it won't be any different. My point is, for the club to be in such a perilous situation, the primary issue, the pressing issue at the club, was the ownership of the club. That's why they were put up for sale, why they were seeking investment, why we got to the point where Ratcliffe's there in the first
Ran out
place.
of money. Literally ran out of money. Wouldn't invest their own money, and the business model had started to fail, as we've seen, right? So the debt, the overall debt, depends how you think about debt, right? There's the senior bonds, 500 and something million pounds. There's the revolving credit facility, which is now up to nearly 300 million pounds. That's basically been used for, a little bit of cash flow, mostly for transfers. Then there's the transfer money, the payables we owe. I don't consider that to be debt. It's often reported in the press as debt. It's not really. It's just your operating costs, right? Because we also owed money. And so it's a hell of a lot of money. The drain in terms of interest is, depending on like forex exchanges and so on, is between 22 and 30 million pounds a year, something like that, right? So for a company that makes 700 and something million pounds and should be making way, way, way more if we were actually doing okay, it's serviceable, but it obviously impacts the long-term ability of the club to do. We might finance a stadium in a different way if you didn't have £1 billion worth of debt, right? Or 700 and something million in reality. And it might be a cheaper way of financing it. And so it does impact the club, and 20 to 30 million pounds obviously has an impact as well. What have they been doing to fix it? Well, they ripped out a load of costs, as you know, personally, nearly 40 to 50 million pounds a year. There are some people online who pretend to be finance experts that do not give an accurate picture about that. Some famous ones who make a lot of noise on TalkSport, but they've taken a lot of costs out. the squads, the makeup of the squad costs, the wages and so on has changed significantly as well. We're about to lose about £50 million a year in the summer with, let's assume, something happens with Rashford, whether it's another loan or a sale. Højlund's obviously going, not massive wages. Sancho comes off the books, massive wages. Casemiro comes off the books, massive wages. And Harry Maguire will see his new contract, if he gets one, will be a reflection of his age and status and so on, right? So they've changed the cost base of the club hugely. It's a gamble because by changing the player cost base, are you getting into a position where you are still getting good players, but on a different wage structure? Cunha and Mbeumo, expensive, but not in terms of wages, not in Premier League terms. And can they beat the market, essentially, which is to get into the Champions League by paying non-Champions League wages, which is what they're doing. We're the fourth biggest wage bill in the country, maybe the fifth. Aston Villa are very close, that should tell you something. And we'll see what happens in the summer in terms of like the kind of deals they do, whether how they reinvest that money. But if they're going for younger players, they'll be on a lower wage. If Bruno goes, and it's still a question, isn't it? Because he has that release clause and stuff. Mason Mount will be the largest earner in the club, that's just not right. He's a nice man, and he seems like a nice chap, doesn't he, Mason Mount? But it's not right that Mason Mount is the largest earner at United. So anyway, it's just to say finances have been restructured really heavily at United, and it's not always seen. Is it a good thing, bad thing? I'm not saying really, it's just facts. And the idea, I think, their strategic gamble is that gives them more headroom to then reinvest in the pitch, get back into the Champions League on an ongoing basis. It needs to be in there for like 3 seasons in a row for their pool share to actually increase. Because if you look at the money, Liverpool, Arsenal are made about £100 million from the group stage of the Champions League this year. Chelsea about 90, City again about 100, and Newcastle about 50, right? Because their pool is much lower, their pool share. And United will be in that position when you get back in the Champions League. So you need 2 or 3 years in a row to get back up to the big dollars, pounds, euros. Anyway, money. There is segue into talking about Fulham. There's a protest planned this weekend. The 1958 other supporters groups are planning it ahead of Fulham. Early kickoff, so I think the protest is starting fairly early as well. Again, with these protests, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Wayne. I find the calls rather vague. Like, Ineos out, Glazers out, great, but what do you want, right? What is the concrete thing are we showing our anger at the Glazers? Well, we've been doing that for 20 years. Yes, they're scumbags and they've ruined this club. But what do we want, right? So I've never really been clear about that one.
Yeah, this time maybe not. They're actually saying it's going to be one of the largest turnouts, so that's what they're predicting.
I hope so. I mean, visceral protests can make change happen, but you have to have a clear idea about what you want.
For example, the Super League protests is very, very evident what they were mobilising for.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the past. We know what the supporters have been mobilising for, the Green and Gold campaign, everything like that. Yeah, it is sometimes hard to tell. Look, this is going to, if anyone from the 1958 hears this and thinks I'm being critical, I'm not. Or the TRA, for that matter, because I know that there's some overlapping in there, as there should be. I think it's great that there's a mobilisation of supporters and a vehicle for them to create a lot of noise. But I'm with you on this. Like, if you've got that power, and they certainly have, they've got it. They've got power enough to have a voice. They've got power enough to have a presence inside Old Trafford. They get noticed enough. They got the presence outside Old Trafford that gets noticed enough. Have a vision of what you're trying to accomplish that's something bigger than Ratcliffe and Glazer out, or something that's more timely, because if it's a protest to remind everyone that we're here and this is what we believe in, then great. And I know that there were some noises at the start of the season as well. So I'm not saying that they've not consistently made noise. They have done that. They've posted letters online or online statements, or they've done things. But it has to have a cause behind it. Like I was saying earlier, I didn't finish the point because it's the same one I've rambled onto in the past, where one of the things that should have come out of the Europa League final was some kind of guidance on those drag-along rights, what Ratcliffe and the Glazers intended to do with that, if anything. There should have been some kind of vocalisation on there before we got announcements about stadiums. To say, this is where we're going with the ownership. This is what's going to happen. You know, like some kind of communication there with the fans. Now, if they were protesting for that, if they actually vocally came out and said, look, you didn't say what's happening with this. You haven't given us any intention. We know that Ratcliffe's put some money in. But it's not that. You know, if it was a protest against people losing their jobs, but that's been and gone. So I don't, apart from the fact that we're present and we're letting you know that we're present, and that's not a bad thing, by the way. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If that in itself, but they would have to come out and say, this is just a reminder that we are present and we can do things. But that's, there's nothing, they're not disturbing anything, right? They're not there to say, we're going to stop kickoff. We're not going to get in 10 minutes late or anything. We're just going to be present. We're going to get some attention by the fact that we're present against the ownership. And we know all that. We do already know all that. There's enough presence to already inform us of that.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm being critical of a protest. I'm not. I'm 100% aligned with the idea that we need ownership change at United in order to take the club forward. I've been to protests before. It's like, it is valuable to show that there is power in the collective of support, and we're aligned, and the 58 group have done more than any other group, I'd say, to align disparate ideas, right, around a concept. But in order to get that alignment, it's vague, right? So protesting and asking for the Glazers and Ineos to go isn't going to make that happen, right? What will make it happen, unfortunately, is when the Glazers decide they want to cash out. That's the only thing that can make it happen, right? Ratcliffe, through the sales process, it was very, very clear. Go read the SEC sales documents. I still get people now challenging me on this. Just bloody read, dudes. It's there in public. Like the sales process, he wanted a controlling share. He didn't offer 100% of the club because of the way, I don't think 100% of the club was actually for sale. But the way the bids were structured, it was for controlling rights of the club. The deal couldn't get done like that. He bought 30% of the club instead, 29.7%. Right? What happens next if the Glazers decide to sell their 10x voting rights shares is that they will have to go to the market and say, here's another sales process. Here's a brochure. It's a publicly listed company still, right? Here is what we're undertaking another strategic review. We're looking for a sale. Now, that at the same time, because all shareholders have to have the same rights, right? And they're still public shares. I own some shares, right? I have the same rights as Ratcliffe, to the same information about the market. I don't own many, not as many as him, by the way. And I wish I did. I'd cause some trouble, I tell you. Anyway, so you'll have to be another public process. Now, in the back channel, they may be negotiating with Ratcliffe around a change of ownership, partial, about him putting a bit more money in. That may come with the stadium financing deal all at the same time. Who knows, right? Depending on his finances, how much he wants to leverage through Ineos, who the shares were obviously transferred from Trawlers Limited to Ineos. How much of it is his personal money versus Ineos money? He is the major shareholder in Ineos too. What they are doing around their financing, because they have some bonds, a few billion euros worth of bonds maturing in 2027 as well, right? And they're all kind of wrapped together. But to come back to the protest, I think they work best when it's something really clear that you're asking for, and this one isn't. And so it's going to be noisy and visible, but diminishing returns on what happens until you say, we want a thing. Now, if it was around ticket prices, right? Let's be really clear, we want lower ticket prices because you're pricing fans, working class fans out of the club. That's a really clear ask, right? You may not get it, but if you're noisy enough, you get something, right? If you put enough pressure on, you can get something. If it's around how the club treats fans, right? The matchday experience, moving fans, changing ticketing for away games and European games, that's a visible, tangible ask. Vague ownership, it's not really. And I think as a result, it will fall on deaf ears at the with the powers that be. Maybe not the media, maybe not fans themselves. Maybe there's value in just bringing everyone together to show that we're united. I mean, there is value in that, but it could be more valuable, I think.
Yeah, there is. But the point I was going to make there is that I don't think it will fall on deaf ears. I think everyone at the club will be aware that it's happening. I think everyone who needs to know about it will be aware that it's happening. But if you're just there in number, I don't think it affects anything, really. I think it does. I think you get presence, you get some photographs. But like I said, it's, I'm not advocating for anger or anything like that. I just think...
Well, mind you, when they broke into the stadium and got a match called off...
No, but that's what I'm saying. But they knew what they were doing then, and they knew that that's what they were doing it against. It was against the Super League. It was there to make a point. This time, if you do things, you just say we're going to turn up in a large crowd. I just think you run the risk at some point going, oh, they're here again in a large crowd. It doesn't really do anything apart from at one point inside that kind of aggravation. And I don't think that that's what they're doing. Yeah, I just think that they want. I think it's a reminder. It feels like it's a reminder that they still exist. Great, but no one who mattered ever doubted that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. The pathway to ownership change, there, as far as I can tell, I think there are about 3 options. Right, one is status quo. Nothing happens. Ratcliffe, operational control, minority shareholding. Nothing changes on the debt because there's no incentive for anyone to do anything. And we just hope that things get better on the pitch and that changes United's financial outlook, right? And we'll see what happens at the stadium. 2 is Glazers decide they want to sell some more or all of the club. That's where the drag-along rights come into play. They can put it onto the market and it's a bidding war. The floor is $33 a share. We're miles away from that in terms of the public, so there's a massive premium for anyone who wants to come in. That pretty much rules out private equity unless it's the kind of vulture capital type that want a very aggressive operational change, like as Clearlake have done at Chelsea. I don't think we want that, by the way. I don't think we want that kind of ownership. We're not going to be happy with that. See what happens to the fan experience when the only thing that matters is the bottom line. We can argue that's the only thing that matters now. There may be some kind of change with Ratcliffe taking full ownership. I do not like this guy, and I think they made some terrible mistakes, 3 massive ones coming in. I don't like him as a person. I don't like his politics. I think it's probably better for the club if that happens, though, because he's, and this could turn out to be completely wrong, of course, but he's not in. He's in it for legacy. He can still make bad decisions, but he's not in to extract. Like, I know people still say that. It's just not true. In fact, as part of the sales agreement, of course, he stopped dividends going out of the club, right? He's actually no longer taking dividends out of Ineos. That was a signal to the market that the financial turnaround, he's taking a personal stake in it. So I think that's a better option. I guess the 4th option, so we've got partial sale to Vulture Equity or partial or full sale to Ratcliffe. We've got no change, and then we've got state-backed funds. The thing with the state-backed funds is that the option was there on the table and it didn't happen. All right, so... And like the major states that might be interested in that already own clubs. Doesn't seem like it's a realistic pathway. I guess you've got benevolent dictator, tech billionaire comes in, buys club, and there's many who could afford it. None bid last time when they could have done it. So anyway, it's just to say most of the scenarios for ownership change are unrealistic. All right, should we talk about some actual football?
Yes, why not?
Fulham this weekend. They are actually playing really well. Great results recently. Beat Brighton recently. They're only just behind us in the table. Interesting stylistically. I think Marco Silva will be on a long list of people that United will be interested in talking to about the managerial situation. He's almost certainly leaving Fulham in the summer. They didn't spend much money last summer. Interestingly, I think there was some frustration there. I talked to the Fulham pod earlier in the season about that, but they play good football. They're not a pure low block side, mid block and counter. There may be some of the game on the front foot. Different stylistic challenge for Carrick and his team.
Yep, and obviously United themselves, they will have to theoretically come out and attack Fulham, whereas they were quite happy to be. Well, the idea was they could be counter-attacking against City and Arsenal, but they turned out to be the idea of the game was counter-attack, don't get me wrong, but we were so aggressive in the way that we played, they didn't always look like that.
Yeah.
Against Arsenal, the idea is that they let you have the ball anyway, and I just think that they were punished in the areas where they let us have it. Fulham, it's not going to be like that. Fulham have got a good record. Like I said, it's an interesting one with Fulham because they are, and I say this with all due respect, and I've got a soft spot for Fulham because Paddy Barclay loved Fulham and he never stopped talking about them. And they are like a proper old club.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something, I know that they've rebuilt one of the stands, but it is still a proper weird little London club. And I mean that with affection, that they built in the community. And it's always been what it is. And I love that about them. Now, in respect of also respecting that, they are punching as high as they could ever wish to punch where they are right now, and everything is going as well as it possibly could. This isn't about the game, it's about where they are as a club. I just think like I can understand from Silva's point of view, he's got ambition, he wants to move on. But be careful what you wish for. I mean, I get that there's ambition, but sometimes ambition can be to maintain where you are, and Fulham have done so well in recent years from being a yo-yo club to get past that Al Fayed era of obviously they got into the Premier League in the first place, but the way that they've established themselves as an attractive football outlet, kind of what they were in the 70s, but without the celebrity gimmick. I think that's probably with Marsh and Best, they've established themselves as a proper footballing team. Now, there's nothing wrong with ambition to get into the Champions League clubs. There's nothing wrong with that. They might even break into that at one point, like Villa have. Villa are obviously a much bigger club than Fulham. There are a lot of clubs in the Premier League, like Everton, who might have a renaissance. Ourselves, we might. Spurs, Newcastle, these great clubs that are so much bigger than Fulham. And I mean that with all respect, that they are better positioned to go on these kind of challenges to become a big club in the Champions League for a period of time. Fulham might break into that for a moment. My worry is with the Fulham, and I say this because I like them as a club, that you might over-speculate to get somewhere where you're not meant to be. And where they are now, they're brilliant. They're brilliant to watch. I like their style. Like I said, they mixed it up a little bit. They're not afraid. They're not just one of these teams that sits back. They play in a certain kind of way. Silva's a really good manager. He's overcome some bumps to be where he is as well. And I think sometimes you want to be careful about taking what you've got for granted. And I think he ought to be thinking about that as well.
Yeah.
And I just think they are going to be very dangerous opponents at Old Trafford because they don't have anything to lose by coming out and playing open. And I think that that's going to be a problem for United because they'll be compact, they'll be disciplined, but there's a difference between just shutting the shop and coming out to play and win a game of football. Because Fulham will still try and do that.
Yeah, they will. Yeah. Yeah. Marco Silva was an interesting one because obviously, did it work at Everton? Not really, but it was kind of a difficult time for that club financially, right? So he's never really had the big job, has he? And you can understand why he would want that if given the opportunity. Fulham, I think you're right. You know, I do think as a club they understand their level. They've got this model where they are a local community club, but they also attract tourists, and they can charge a decent price for the kind of tourist tickets who are coming. And I mean like pure tourists here, not people who are heading over from Oslo for a game at Old Trafford or whatever, but people who just happen to be in London are like, let's catch a Premier League game. And Fulham are the club that have really lent into that. Barcelona do it, by the way, you know, because Barcelona itself is such a popular tourist attraction, and they charge like 5 times as much for non-socios tickets. So you can kind of understand why clubs would do that. They have like had this model of like getting other cast-offs from around the Premier League, haven't they? So Harry Wilson's probably the best player this year. A lot of assists and goals. Alex Iwobi. You've got Raul Jimenez up front. Also, you know, obviously we weren't sure whether he'd still make it as a top player after his head injury. And Emil Smith-Rowe they picked up from Arsenal. He's probably been a failure, I guess, at Fulham. But they picked up these players from around the Premier League, and it's got them to a position where they are better than mid-table. All right, and that is like, given that you have 6 clubs who want to get into the Champions League every year, maybe 7, 8 with Villa and Newcastle as well. And everyone else just wants to stay in the division, basically. It doesn't feel like a scenario in which they're at a risk of going down. Definitely not this year, but at all. They're well established in the Premier League now.
Oh yeah, and you want to maintain that position, especially when you have moments of sort of like financial acceleration in the game. There is going to be those temptations to speculate, and do you move forward and try and take that leap, or do you just consolidate where you are? We've seen many teams in the past, Leeds, Sheffield Wednesday, speculate and go into deep trouble. Forest, another club, it took them ages to recover and to come back up.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for respecting the punch above your weight. And they do, like I said, as a club, they certainly do. My point is that they might not at some point. Now, where they are, I mean, they come to Old Trafford, they get results, they play us at Craven Cottage, we've got a decent record down there, but they've got a really good record of getting results against big teams now. I think that's a really good position for them, and they could well come to Old Trafford and win on Sunday. And the point, so I'm saying all this, and I'm going, all right, well, punching above your weight, little club and all that sort of stuff. What I'm trying to put into perspective here is that they're very dangerous opponents for United. In the perspective and the context of this game, they're very dangerous opponents, and it's a really good test for Michael Carrick to come out and it'll tell us a lot about Carrick as a coach, to say like, well, is he going to be wise enough to go, we've got to make a few changes here? One of them's going to be enforced. I personally would have gone, all right, well, you've won against City, you've won against Arsenal, you've kept the same team, you go with the same team again, but Dogu's injury has forced the issue. He's going to change it around. It'll probably be Acuna that comes in, and then the rest of it will take care of itself. But it's not going to be necessarily straightforward as going, oh, you just pick the same team and they go again, because Fulham will pose different problems. Mm-hmm. The kind of problems, by the way, what I'm saying, like against City and against Arsenal, the defence we picked was perfect to do the job that he needed to do. Will that necessarily be the case against Fulham? I'm not sure. Yeah. I remember, I know Traore is moving on. He'll be somewhere else by the time that this game comes around, probably. But at least that's what we're led to believe, right? He was moving.
It looks like he's going to West Ham.
So the moment I'm playing back in my mind is when he burned away from Maguire on the halfway line. So it's 2 seasons ago when they were on Old Trafford. It was like chaotic end, because he had the speed to just like burn away from him. And he's a very scary player. Thank God he's not going to be in the team then on Sunday. But they've got threats to win the game because they'll keep going to win it. And United have got to find a different kind of way of playing at Old Trafford. This is his first test, Carrick, of going, all right, this is a different kind of opponent. We're not expected to be sitting back and counter-attacking. We're expected to dominate the ball. The one thing I'm going to be interested about, Ed, with Carrick, and this game will be a good test of it, I'm going to be one of the first to nail my flag to the mast with this one. I wonder, when they talk about great managers and they get their influences from certain games that they watched in the past, like many would say that they watched the Hungary-Germany game, what I'm talking, Hungary-England game, sorry, going back generations.
1950 something, yeah.
53. And
when you were just a youngster, Wayne.
And I had hair better than what you put on the pig thing.
Go check out my Twitter feed for my reply to Wayne. I gave him a haircut.
Yeah,
it was good.
I'm down with the kids. I was very modern. I was my Cole Palmer haircut. So anyway, my point being that there's managers who've got single games as their influences of how they played football. I mean, a lot of people look at the Holland team in the '74 World Cup and say this is the way that I visualise the way that I want my team to play, even though it's got a modern interpretation on it. Gordon Jago, I worked with on his autobiography, who went on to be QPR manager. He talked about a Germany-England game that he'd been to, and it influenced the way that he set up tactically for his entire career. I wonder, United always played 4-4-2 when Carrick was the player, right? They never moved away from that. Periods where they played 4-3-3 in the 07-08 season, but traditionally 4-4-2. Never got away from that. Apart from the first time that we ever moved to 4-2-3-1, which was the game against Roma where we won 7-1. and Carrick played deeper, and he scored 2 goals. But I think it was Carrick and Fletcher who were sitting, and in front of them, Alan Smith played as the 9, and Rooney, Ronaldo, and Giggs were. Ronaldo was playing from the right, but Rooney and Giggs basically had carte blanche to do what they wanted. Mm-hmm. They had a free role, and it was really bold tactical move from Ferguson on the night, and obviously destroyed them in the first half. And every team, most of the top teams now play 4-2-3-1. I wonder if there's something in that for Carrick. I wonder if someone will ask him about that game, the fact that he plays this kind of way, and United attack it in such. And it is just the giddiness of those first 2 games and seeing the way that we attacked and the way that we were so dynamic in the attack. I wonder if there's something in that was influenced by the way that we prepared for that game, the way that those perform. And yeah, look, this is 2 wins. 2 wins where we've scored a lot of good goals, but the way that we played, the way that the team set out, the way that the team played throughout the game, and the way that they were so aggressive in their approach is so similar to the way we played against Roma. You're not going to win every game 7-1, but it is about attitude. It's about domination of certain areas of the ball and pitch. And I wonder if someone will put the question to him at some point over the next few weeks, if we continue to play well. Mm-hmm. Were you motivated by your preparation for that? And do you see, I mean, one part of this is an obvious yes. Do you see every perfect game of football planning out in the way that 7-1 did against Roma? But a game like that, if you're involved in it and it goes as well as it can because the plan was executed perfectly, and now every team plays that way, I do wonder if there's a case to be saying, is influenced by that and the way that we played. And if there is some kind of truth to that, then we can be very excited because that's the best way that a United team can play, really. So,
yeah,
just a thought.
I think it's kind of interesting his tactical approach to these last 2 games. Of course, in one sense, they were one-offs, weren't they? Special measures to counter what City and Arsenal had. I was surprised it was the same team for Arsenal. I mean, I said it on the pod, and people love to point out when my takes age well, don't they? Hey, if you do 20 plus years of content on the internet, there's lots of bad takes out there, guys, you can find. But I was surprised it's the same team because I thought the approach that was needed was going to be different for Arsenal, who do not leave the same kind of space for transitions that City do. As it turned out, the approach was very different against Arsenal, but with the same players, which shows a level of tactical flexibility in thinking that Ruben Amorim absolutely never did in 14 months and 60-odd games in charge, right? So it gives me some hope, right? The structure they found out of possession, which Steve Holland has been working on apparently, was basically a 4-4-2, and that has worked brilliantly. This, again, is a different challenge, right? United will have a little more than 50% of the ball, right? So it was like 49-51 against Brighton. Brighton, we know, a heavy possession team, but Fulham have not been quite as good on the road. They lost at Leeds, didn't they, a couple of weeks ago? So let's imagine we have a little bit more possession. What does that mean in terms of the personnel? There's one definite change. We know that. Odorgu out. Cunha will probably come in. That's not a bad change, honestly, if you're going to have more ball in the final third and it's not all transitional. His ability to run and disrupt the opposition by carrying the ball past players, and we know he's a brilliant finisher from distance, is not a bad change to make anyway. There's the question about Benjamin Sesko. He's apparently disappointed he hasn't had some time, of course, and he's had such a disrupted season with injury and been in and out of the team, and he never seems to have got any flow. There's a question whether he would come in, more traditional striker against the team that will, as I said, not play a low block, but will not have 60% possession against us. So there's a question there. You asked about the defence. It is true that the City and Arsenal games were absolutely perfect for Harry Maguire, who's magnificent in both. The times he struggled as a player at United when we're on the front foot and there's more space behind and he has to defend more space because, of course, he's just not that quick. But I'd be really surprised if they make any changes there. The partnership with him and Lisandro Martinez has worked pretty well. Lisandro's passing has been sublime and made such a difference to United's ability to build up. So there's a question at right back. Does Nusam Mazraoui get an opportunity at some point? He's a better footballer than Diogo Dalot. Just more comfortable on the ball, better passer, inverts better, just better.
Actually, I actually think, while we were ringing through the changes, just a thought that came to mind with this. I actually think that if you consider the likely outcomes here, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, because we can all see the logic in making changes and we can all see the logic in keeping it as it is, apart from the change that you've got to make. Now, his question then, I would probably posit this theory that you would go, all right, you go with the no changes, stick with Cunha, but then tell the players that it's on them. Just say, look, either way, if we don't pick up a result and I made the changes or don't make the changes, I'm going to get it in the neck if we don't win here. And you're also going to get questioned as players, because no matter what happens, if we don't win, the alternative theory is going to be put at Carrick. Oh, well, you should have made changes. Oh, well, you should have kept it as it was.
That's sure. Big club management, though.
Exactly. But so my thought would be that Carrick would be putting that to the players and go, like, how many times have you been questioned over these years that you've gone and won those kind of games, and then this is the kind of game that you've struggled in? This is a really big opportunity for you as players, and I'm going to keep you all in, apart from Patrick, who's to miss out. You've now got a chance because you've earned your places. You've got a chance to go out there and actually put on a show. Like I said, they're going to have a lot of football. United's players, they're going to have a lot of the possession and a lot of opportunities, and the best thing that we've got with this current team that we didn't have in the past, this is just my opinion, other people might disagree, but we've got a lot of good players on the ball who can unlock things that are in front of them. Ahmad and Mbeumo, we know what they can do. Cunha and Fernandes, you would never be worried about their ability to create chances or create any kind of opening that's in front of them. So that front four actually can play against a defence that sits back, so I don't worry about that. It's a really good opportunity for Carrick to sort of test these players mentally. And can we learn something different? Yes, we can, because it's not the same group of players that have let us down all these years. It's a different kind of group of players now. So there's that opportunity there for them to kind of not exercise the demons completely, because they're still going to carry them till the end of the season, but to answer a big question against them. And it's a really good opportunity for Carrick to kind of get over a little mental hurdle, because if he does that, it actually tells us more about this squad and about him as a manager than the other two games did.
Absolutely. Everton, Chelsea against 10 men, West Ham, Bournemouth. I guess you could put the Leeds and Burnley away games in that, although they were slightly different for different reasons. But drop points against so-called lesser teams, so many points in the last 2 months. Incredible. And there's a certain mental fragility in there. Yeah, you're right. Can Carrick get them to really believe in themselves? Just think of the momentum, though. If we win this game, and then we've got a away fixture against Everton, we've got West Ham at home. I forget who else is there. We got Leeds at home at some point, haven't we?
Spurs.
Leeds is a little bit later, February, I think. But there's definitely a run of 6-7 games here where you're looking at them going, they're all pretty winnable. Then we get into some tough games. You know, we've got the away game at Newcastle. There's another game against Liverpool, and so on. Another fixture against Chelsea. It starts to get a bit tougher from March onwards. But February, you're like, next 4 games, you're like, what a lot of momentum we could get with those. 6 matches unbeaten in the Premier League now. I know we lost the cup game against Brighton, but 6 matches unbeaten in the Premier League, 3 different managers, 2 massive victories. I'm looking at the next 4 going, show us that you lot are better than the number of points you've got, and look like we'd set up United magnificently. If we did
the other thing is that Carrick with is so middle of the road in terms of like he's not going to get too carried away. He's the perfect kind of embodiment of what you would want to see in a United manager, not in terms of like everything that he is as in terms of coach, but in terms of his character. Yeah, he's not going to get carried away with the way that we've done well, and I think this is a really good opportunity then for him to go like, well, these are the standards that we expect of you, and in doing it in that calm way, to do it in a way that we're not getting carried away. Well, this is Manchester United. This is what we expect of you, and what we do expect of them is to win against Fulham at Old Trafford. With all due respect to Fulham, that's the status quo for United. So if they want to start playing like a United team, and they are doing at the moment, it's a massive elevation. Like I said, I've talked about it on this podcast so many times about the value of momentum and confidence, and how those kind of things can come from nothing.
Yeah.
And it has come from nothing, and long may it continue. And there's a really good opportunity for that. And if Carrick can prove that, because it's more about Carrick than the players at this moment in time, I feel like it is. But it is still a good opportunity for him to motivate the players in there as well, with keeping them all grounded as well.
Right.
without getting too carried away with it, there's a good opportunity to really build something special within that squad.
There absolutely is, yeah. And some of the criticism of Carrick's appointment has been around this kind of, well, Wilson wrote this kind of sneering piece, didn't he, about United's, going down this retro road again with another manager. There's criticism, of course, of his CV, right? 3 years at Middlesbrough, you can pick through that, some success, some failure. It's not, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United. He's not had all these big jobs, of course, but he made 3 Champions League finals. He got a fuck ton of silverware, more than anyone else in this squad. I think he has the respect of the players from that. He knows this club inside out. As you said, he's a very level, calm head. He bats away all the nonsense. In the press conferences, he's a much more emotionally stable person than Ruben Amorim was. And, as you know, I was always concerned about Amorim's emotional regulation, right? He just couldn't do it. He was all over the place. I don't think that when he talked about Patrick Dorgu being too anxious all the time, I think that was him doing it, because look what's happened to Patrick Dorgu as soon as he's gone, right? Didn't look anxious when he was slamming one into the top corner at the Emirates, did he?
No, that's fair as well.
So Carrick has been good for this club, right? He's come in, he's obviously a smart coach because he's come up with 2 unique systems to beat the 2 best clubs in the country. And he's taken everything else in his stride as you'd expect him to do. And that's not me advocating for him getting the permanent job. I know you joke on social media and stuff like that about him getting a 10-year contract or 20 years or whatever, but I'm not advocating for him to get the job. There's enough time for United just to play this process out, talk to all the names and try and make a good decision, finally. We'll see. But for the moment right now, I can't think of someone who's more perfect. Now, of course, if Fulham win 3-0 at Old Trafford on Sunday, I may be what a terrible decision this was. But I don't see it right now. We'll see whether that take ages badly as well.
I just want to make a point on the Jonathan Wilson piece, because I've read that and he's also done sneering pieces in the past. And it is, whenever he does, it's about United's tendency to go into the nostalgia element. And he doesn't like that about United. That's fair. He's entitled to his opinion. I've got to say, on the evidence of what we've seen post-Ferguson, there is probably some kind of unquantifiable value in knowing United. And I'm not quite sure where I place it, because it's just a thought, and I wrote something on Substack about it a couple of weeks ago, when I think it's when I was either talking about Carrick as an appointment. I think it might have been after the City game, actually. I was speaking about this, where there's some kind of quality in there that isn't something that we can dismiss, and that is the knowings of the inner workings of Old Trafford, and knowing the way that, how to handle a press conference, how to handle the temperament of the dressing room at Carrington, how to read the mood, how to understand the day-to-day pressure and to maintain your level of professionalism and calm throughout, and to be the leader in that kind of environment. I'm not saying Carrick's always been that leader, but he's been around enough of them to know what that experience is. Is that quality worth as much as winning the Portuguese league or winning the Dutch league, or whatever quality or attribute a young coach might have in this modern environment? I think there's a good argument to say that it can be. People say, oh, Solskjaer was a failure. No, he wasn't. He wasn't a failure. It didn't go as well as we would have wanted it to. But there were things to take from that. And one of the biggest things to take from it, the biggest plus, probably the biggest plus of anything, apart from the fact that we've won trophies, of any managerial reign, has been the feeling that we've had when Solskjaer was there, where everything was kept kind of level until the last sort of 6 or 7 weeks. Everything was always calm. When he was representing the club in the press conferences, there was never a doubt, and we had this doubt with every single other manager, there was never a doubt that he was putting the club first, that every action that he was doing was for the benefit of the club. And you get that feeling without even saying it from Michael Carrick, because you know that's who he is and what he represents.
Yeah.
So as far as you want to say, not you, but as far as Jonathan Wilson wants to criticise the club for going into the nostalgia and saying it can't work, I don't think that that's actually true. I think we might actually see over the next 3 or 4 months a strong argument that that's the best thing that United could do. I'm not necessarily saying give him the 6-year contract or whatever, But to make sure that there's something, a connection there, even if it's Carrick staying, I know he won't do it, but just a Carrick or a Carrick-esque kind of person to be around whoever comes in, if it's not Carrick, that this kind of spell will be the strongest argument for that. Because I think if Amorim would have known how to handle the press conferences, if he'd had someone who was more connected with United to sort of calm that chaos, if Mourinho had known a better way to articulate, not that he would ever have gotten that from Mourinho, but if he'd have got a better way of articulating the way that he came across at press conferences, because even he didn't get it. What I'm trying to say, a long-winded way like I normally do, is that value will become more clear over the next few months. Now, it might not be the general consensus of the public. It won't be the general consensus of the press. They'll probably sneer at it. They'll probably go, oh, it's just United being nostalgic again. In order to keep United stable on the pitch, I think it's actually necessary to have something like that around. And if that's one of the biggest lessons that we can take over the next few months, then I hope, beyond anything, that what Ratcliffe and Wilcox and Broader are looking at is that rather than telling us that they're going to dictate what it is, actually acknowledge that you have to have custodians of the spirit around the place. And if that's the best thing we can get from the Carrick experiment, then it'll be an absolutely valuable lesson for us to think. So I just don't like the steaming aspects of it, because I think there are clubs, the only two clubs I can think of that come to mind, because other clubs can reinvent themselves. Liverpool and United can't do that. They're two big institutions. So you actually have to appreciate, and you have to indulge, water that nostalgia. You actually have to incorporate it to who you are, because if you're not doing that, then you're not who you are. And over the last 2 weeks, we've seen everything that we've seen that's good from United over the last 2 weeks is because it's so reminiscent and so nostalgic. That's exactly, and everything, the wins, the performances, but it's because it resembles who we're meant to be. And you shouldn't sneer at that. It's the biggest joy you can get from football.
Okay, well said. We'll leave it there. Wilson, who criticised United being nostalgic, has made a career on being nostalgic about football. There was some irony there. Thank you very much, Wayne. Listeners, you can find clips on YouTube. I am still uploading some shorts, even if we're not doing the full pod right now. You can find us on patreon.com/NQAT pod for the extra show. Wayne is on Substack. If you look for Wayne Barton, he does the occasional piece. I am too at nqatpod.substack.com. See you next time. Bye now.